Welcome to Total Design Live. It's a podcast where real tabletop game designers with a surprise set of design constraints design a game right before your very ears. It's game design without a net, and it starts now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special episode of Total Design Live. I'm David Abelson.
And I'm Rosco Schock. Thanks for joining us.
Today, we just wanted to start by introducing ourselves. So let me introduce Rosco. This is Rosco. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, David. So just a little bit more of my personal background. Like a lot of game designers, I work in software engineering, mostly writing mobile apps for healthcare, that kind of space. Yeah, I've been playing games a long time, started playing Pinochle when I was 8 to 10 years old with my dad. Kind of moved through other things, the classic mass market stuff, until I learned how to play Magic in college. Yes, I'm that old. Played Magic for a long, long time, and then kind of got tired of keeping up with all the sets and going to the tournaments and that kind of stuff, and kind of transitioned over to board games and the Board Game Geek Top 100, and then just started playing, and then eventually said, well, I can make something as terrible or maybe better than some of these things, so why don't I give that a try? I won't bore you with more details, but that should be enough to give you a sense. How about you, David?
So my story is absolutely the same, but totally different. I played games as a kid, the standard like Hasbro, Milton Bradley kind of board games that you could get for your birthday, and then stopped. I just didn't want anything to do with games when Magic the Gathering came out. Again, I was in college. I just didn't want anything to do with that. Dungeons and Dragons was not my thing, and I just had other aspirations. But later on in life, my son was 14 years old, and my stepson, and we had moved quite a distance away from his father, and he had always played games with his father, so I wanted to make sure that he had something comfortable to do. So I started playing games with him. Started with Magic the Gathering, which was not a good choice because I'm not very good at it. And he was already pretty accomplished as a player. But we played a couple of board games, and I sort of got the bug. And I really got into board games. I was in Charlotte at the time. I had a really good scene for board games. So I could go a couple of different places and have a pretty good group that I could play with. And right off the bat, one of the first things that I thought was, hey, I wonder if I could design one of these. And so I did. I then designed another one and designed another and just kept designing stuff. But my second design, actually, I published myself in 2018. And that game is called Intel. And then I've had another published since then in 2022. They published Gartenbau, which won a Mensa Select Award. So I'm pretty excited about that. But that's not why we're here today. So what we want to do is just talk about some of the experiences that sort of led us to here, right? So if you don't mind, I want to just tell the listeners a little bit about what sort of brought me to the idea of the Design 75 Challenge, which I think is sort of what happened where we met. We met at Proto ATL.
Yeah,
right?
So it would be 6 years ago, and it was back when it was at the PSI warehouse. It was like held in their break room, which was the least climate controlled room in the world, and you had like literally 60 or 70 mostly sweaty dudes, just like reeking up the place. But it was really awesome because there was a lot of people, a lot of energy, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, that's where we first met.
And what's great about it is it's all designers and all prototypes. There are a couple of people who came just to play prototypes, but for the most part, all these people are at some level of the design hierarchy process, in the world of board game design. And so it was a really great opportunity for me to meet Rosco and a bunch of other people. But by that time, I had already been to the Gen Con First Exposure Playtest Hall and at least one Unpub event and some local meetups with other designers. And what I've discovered was I really found the design culture really fascinating, that there were so many different designs and so many different ways to go about it. And I had begun listening to podcasts. I listened to podcasts like the Board Game Design Lab and Ludology, and I learned about game design because I was hungry to find out more. But all I could think of was, wouldn't it be great if we could see inside the mind of a designer as they were going through this process? So I conceived of this thing called the Design 75 Challenge, and this is what it was. A designer would basically get a set of parameters by email or by text message, and then they would begin at that moment with 75 minutes to design a game to the best of their ability, and with the goal of it being prototype ready within 75 minutes. But they had to record themselves during the whole process on audio so that we could turn that into a podcast. Now, Roscoe, you were one of the first people who recorded for that. Tell us what you thought.
I think one thing too that I remember at the time was I had only been designing for really about 4 months. So this was my second convention. I had gone to PAX Unplugged the year before, and so I knew like I think one other person who was from the Central Pennsylvania area who had gone down to Proto ETL, but I knew almost no one. And so I met all these people, and I was like excited to just kind of learn and explore and see like what all this was about. So when David suggested this, I was silly enough to just say, sure. Like I barely designed anything. Let me try to design a game on the fly, and record myself. So he sent me the email, and I remember the two constraints that I had. So a little bit similar to what we're doing now was set collection, and it was government or maybe police. I don't know. There was a kind of like a compound choice, but basically something government authoritarian, like an authority, government authority kind of thing was the theme. And so, I just cracked open my recorder and like I brought up my Google search engine because I was just going to kind of like riff and search and see what kind of inspired me. And I first started down a bunch of stuff about Rome and things like that. And I really wasn't interested in that. I kind of died on that branch pretty quickly. And I'd remembered recently that at the time that I had on one of those like Wikipedia roulette kind of things where you look up something and then you read something and you click on a link and then pretty soon you're like, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from wherever you started. One of those things. And I remember the source of it was like somebody was talking about something, I guess maybe that horrible Lone Ranger movie came out for Disney. And someone was talking about that. And it prompted the question of like, well, like, is there any historical fact around the Lone Ranger? And so like, that's where the Wikipedia started. And so the thing that quickly, that I read as I was reading through these things was that there's a lot of people who conjecture, and there's evidence, but it's not concrete, that a person named Bass Reeves is the inspiration for the Lone Ranger. And I mean, I believe that. I think it's true. There's too many things that point directly there, but not everyone does. But in any case, I had read that not that long previously. And so once I kind of remembered that, that's where I went. And so the game I designed, it's a little bit about Bass Reeves' life. It's basically riding around eastern Oklahoma. At the time, it was all Indian Territory country, as it was known then. So it was native lands given to the tribes that lived there. And he was a U.S. Deputy Marshal and captured 3,000 prisoners in his 30-year career at a time when you rode on horseback and had a wagon. And so I made that the theme of the game. And there's a little bit of set collection, pattern matching in terms of like you had information to go out and search. And so in the end, I have a game. It's a fully working game. And I've been pitching it. Actually, it's kind of with a publisher right now. We'll see if they end up deciding to publish it or not. But I worked on it for a while, and then I put it on the shelf. And then I think I finally like figured out the weight was one of the things I struggled with on that one, is like how light or heavy to make it. And so the way it stands now, it's very mass friendly. So which is good. There's some reasons for that. But yeah, so I ended up making this game about Bass Reeves. There's a show about him recently. If you haven't read it or learned anything about him, you should. He's an incredibly interesting person. So that was my experience. I'm not sure how well the recording part was, but I recorded that file and I saved it and emailed it over to Dave. I don't know if he remembers anything about my recording or not.
I don't remember much about your recording, to be honest, but one of the reasons is we had about 7 or 8 designers record for the Design 75 Challenge, and one of the things that I'm sort of remorseful about or that I regret is that the podcast never came to fruition. We had pairs of designers record with the same set of constraints with the idea that they would be going head to head as far as the listener was concerned. And we never got an opportunity. It just sort of fell through the cracks. And so all of that footage went to archive. I just wanted to touch real quick on the fact that you said that it was mass, but I think a lot of our listeners might not even know what that phrase means. Can you tell them?
Sure. Sorry to inside baseball too much. If you're not familiar, mass just means mass market. So mass market publishers are looking for games that you can learn in less than 5 minutes, I would say. Very little rules overhead. they can still have strategy, but they're not meant to be, 4-hour brain burning games. Very approachable to people new to the hobby or just new to games in general. Maybe they've only played Monopoly. And so they play Monopoly. What can you put in front of them that they'll be interested in and find compelling? So when I say mass, I just mean very ultra light, even more than I would say what people call gateway, where I would say the rules have to be less than 5 minutes to fit in the mass bucket, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks. Continuing down this path, Design 75 Challenge didn't happen. I had some really great designers do some recordings for that show, and I don't have their permission to name them today, but I hope that we get to talk a little bit more about them in the future, maybe get them back on the show, who knows, to sort of make up for the fact that we never got a chance to do that show. But a lot of the response that I got from designers such as yourself, who had recorded for the show, even who felt like they did a bad job when they recorded for the show, was they thought that the exercise was really meaningful and helpful. And in fact, there was one designer who went out and designed, I don't know, at least a dozen games after the fact using the same methodology. And then I don't know where all those ended up, but just the exercise of getting stuff out of your head and getting started with design is a big deal, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting. I think if you've listened through season 1, you heard quite a different process from the 4 designers that participated. And I think in the coming seasons, you'll see even more of that. And I think the thing that just illustrates is there is no right way to do it. Everyone's kind of a little bit different. I know a lot of designers personally, and also that I just met, who sometimes ideation is a problem for them. Coming up with a new idea or, getting that inertia of getting something far enough along to kind of want to do something with it can be a challenge. Actually, I was at a convention last weekend, and I was playing one of my games with 2 other designers. One's a close friend, and the other one was somebody that they knew, more of an acquaintance. So I gotten out 2 boxes that I had a bunch of prototypes in, and I was like, well, I have this or this or this, whatever. What kind of game do you want to play? Just pick one. And this person was very much of the mindset of, oh, wow, I can barely come up with a single idea. And so the idea that someone has several games to play test at an event, is like magic or voodoo or something. I don't know what the right word is. And that's just talks a little bit to how each of us kind of do things differently, right? Some people are very much spreadsheet first, idea first, whatever. And, I think the thing that we've seen is part of the way to get better at anything is to practice it and practice it different ways, right? If you want to be stronger, you don't just do bench presses and never do anything else, right? You're going to not really exercise your full body. And so, we see it at a lot of conventions and prototyping things where they game jams. Sometimes they're online, sometimes they're in person, where you dump a bucket of stuff in front of a team of a handful of people and then give them a half hour and see what they come up with. And it's interesting in that kind of environment, you see a lot of really crazy stuff, but you also have a thing there where A, that's not very replicable at your house, and B, you're always going to have a little bit of personality conflicts. Somebody's pretty alpha and tries to drive the game in a certain direction, and other people have ideas that could be better, but they're not really going to, it's a fun thing to just see what you can do. And it's very kind of not just time box, but it has a goal. You have to present your thing and you get judged on it and that kind of stuff. And so that doesn't, to me, isn't as conducive to the creative process as something that's more open, where it's as long as you get your starting point, but then you can go and take it anywhere you want. You're not kind of in this very tight box. The one thing that people who know me is that I do a lot of driving, especially in the past decade or so. And a lot of times I do my best designing in the car. I know other people are like that too. It's a little bit like the shower and other things like that. And part of it is it's a way to put yourself into flow. Suffice it to say, flow is sometimes when you can slow your brain down just enough to kind of the speed of your thoughts and what you're kind of processing, kind of just align, and you can just really, really crank through some stuff. And so driving's like that for me. My consciousness is making sure I don't hit anything, but it's not really needing any much brain power, right? I've driven thousands of miles. So my subconscious kind of starts churning, and I can kind of stay at the same speed. And so a lot of times when that's happening, I might be listening to a podcast or thinking about a game that I'm stuck on or whatever it is. And then sometimes I'll hear somebody say something. I'll just say, oh, that's interesting. And I'll just hit pause. And then what I do is I switch to my voice memos app. This is the predominant way I start designs in the past 2+ years. Although I'll say I may not be an expert board game designer, I am an expert at this. I'll say that with the numbers. So since February 2022, I've recorded I'm at 320 voice recordings of game ideas or whatever. And some of them are just short. They're 5 minutes of what if action selection worked like this? And that might be it. Like, it's just a thought that I want to come back to later or something. Or it might be like a theme thing, or, a note to remember to like look into the, trading mechanism from this game. But some of the stuff is 60 to 90 minutes. And at the end, it's a full rule book basically in dictation form. And so it's ready to prototype. And it may never turn into anything. But it's a great way to just kind of let my mind just go free and see like where I end up. And a lot of times I end up completely different to where I thought I was starting, and you just kind of let it go. I find it very powerful. I know other people do similar things, design kind of in this mode of just flow. And I think the thing that's interesting is, as you see in these episodes that we're trying to do, is we're just trying to showcase like how differently people's minds kind of work in this process. The way mine works and the way David's work would be completely different. Like, we start at different spots, different things would inspire us, different things would kind of like spur us on in a different direction, right? Like, to me, game design, you're always imagining some new piece of puzzle you're going to put in front of the player. Even if David and I came to the same fork, he might go left, I might go right. We might have a different player experience in mind. We might have a different theme, integration, whatever it is. And I think you've seen that with the series so far. And this is what we really hope to highlight, is that given the exact same constraints, given people's experience, their life history, their preferences for gameplay, not just as a designer, that they're going to start with that same exact prompt and end up in a very, very, very different place from each other. I think that that's really, really interesting. And I think, there's a lot of podcasts and content and websites out there that'll tell you like how to make prototypes or how to do testing or how to collect feedback, or they'll tell you to like play all the worker placement games if you want to design a worker placement game, so all the things that it could be. To me, this kind of method of like ideation solves two problems for people. One, it's very easy and very approachable, and like it doesn't take a lot of time. Like, you can just record 5 minutes whenever you have it. It can be while you're driving and not doing anything else anyway. It fits in the moments. So even if you are busy and you have a family commitments, some people have a lot of things that they're involved in, multiple jobs, whatever, you can squeeze in 5 minutes on the way to work or whatever it is, right? And so I think that inertia can be very, very powerful. And I think the other thing is just letting your mind wander a little bit, I think is just very, very healthy, right? Creativity is really just imagination. And so by exercising your imagination, I think you can be more creative.
I think that's also not even the end of the story. There's so many ways to branch off on the experience or the exercise and get more out of it as well. There was I was co-designing a game with a designer in Ohio. I was on my way to Florida from Charlotte, and I had 6-8 hours to kill. We just had a phone call, designed a game on the way to Florida. But the process is the same. It's essentially this iterative brainstorming process where you throw stuff out there, test it sort of, for continuity, and then decide whether it needs to stay or go, make a decision and move on, and don't stop. And I think we're beginning to see, and I think as more people listen to the podcast before being on the podcast, you're going to see that there's going to be more of that, because people are going to be able to follow that train. I'm kind of excited about seeing what comes next. I know you are as well, but I think this is a good stopping point if that sounds good to you.
I think that the thing that I just want to call out one other thing. We're really trying to showcase, like I said, some content and techniques essentially to help designers become better designers and to practice being creative. And so in addition to the regular seasons, we're going to try to mix in some other content, some other kinds of things to help with that as well. And so depending how it goes, some of these recordings that I make in the car on a random topic, we might just throw one of them out there here and there and see if anybody finds that interesting, or you can respond on socials or whatever, tell me in person, please stop, no one cares. Or you can just skip that episode if you're not that interested. But I think it's interesting, just the whole like seeing people's brains kind of, I see it all the time when we're doing the recordings with guests. Like, you can literally see people's like gears turning, and it's just really cool. And I know designers love to do this. Anytime you sit down, you play test a game, as soon as we're getting feedback, 4 people are talking about their ideas, they're just doing a similar kind of thing. They're starting with the constraint of the game that exists and what it could be and where it could go. And so we're all used to doing this. This is just a way to practice that anytime you want and get better at it. And so hopefully people will find that helpful in their design career.
And before we say goodbye, I wanted to just add this other thing. Obviously, we're not suggesting that you should only do what we suggest and not go learn more about all the different mechanisms you could include in games, and not go thoroughly research thematic elements that you want to include and not listen to experts about, how good of a job they do with design. I think this is just one piece of the puzzle for us and hopefully for you too. Listeners, if you want to join in any discussion about this episode, this season, last season, or if you'd like to participate in a future season, reach out to us online at Total Design Live on either Twitter or Blue Sky. That's it for this short episode, but we hope you'll join us again soon for more design without a net. Until next time, I'm David.
And I'm Rosco. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Total Design Live. We hope this podcast will help inspire you in your own board game design journey and give you a peek behind the curtain about how other designers' creative process works. Please like and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you'll come back and join us again for future episodes.